As far as the attack is concerned, I still haven't gotten a lot of information because I rely on Pete. But to me, it was an attack. It wasn't one strike, two strikes, three strikes. Somebody asked me a question about the second strike. I didn't know about the second strike. I didn't know anything about people. I wasn't involved in it. I knew they took out a vote. But I would say this. They had a strike. Pete didn't know about second attack having to do with two people. I guess Pete would have to speak to it. I can say this. I want those boats taken out. And if we have to, we'll attack on land also, just like we attack on sea.
As both the president and Secretary Hegseth denied ever knowing about the second strike, members of Congress are continuing to voice their concerns. They existed before. They're definitely in the spotlight now.
In this sense, it looks to me like they're trying to pin the blame on somebody else and not them. There's a very distinct statement that was said on Sunday. Secretary Hegseth said he had no knowledge of this and it did not happen. It was fake news. It didn't happen. And then the next day from the podium at the White House, they're saying it did happen. So either he was lying to us on Sunday or he's incompetent and didn't know it had happened. Do we think there's any chance that on Sunday the Secretary of the Defense did not know there had been a second strike?
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. This is new. We haven't seen Republicans assert this kind of pressure on the Trump administration in a very long time. Remember, all but 3 Republican senators voted to confirm Pete Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense, even though he was clearly unqualified for the job, as his recent actions have once again demonstrated. I don't know if it's the fact that Trump is increasingly seen as a lame duck and no longer as terrifying to these Republican senators, or if some of them have genuinely rediscovered the fact that they are part of a separate branch of government. Either way, it appears that at least one kind of accountability for at least one part of the Trump regime may finally happen. Senator Elissa Slotkin from Michigan tried to sound the alarm during Hegseth's confirmation about how unfit he was to lead the department. She has been demanding accountability ever since, and now finally may have Republican senators on board. She also, as you well know, was one of the senators featured in the Don't Give Up the Ship video, reminding those in the military that they have an obligation to refuse illegal orders. For that, she was threatened by Donald Trump with hanging. I caught up with Senator Slotkin as she was headed to vote. There's lots happening in Washington right now, and leaders like Elissa Slotkin are doing everything they can to hold this administration accountable. Here's our conversation. Senator Elissa Slotkin, welcome to the show. I know we're on the clock. You've got to go vote, so we will jump right into it. It feels like, at long last, your Republican colleagues may be waking up to their responsibilities to provide oversight to the executive branch. Should we expect the kinds of hearings that the American people deserve into these strikes in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific? Have we finally turned a corner in the Senate doing its job? And I'm not talking about you and your caucus. I'm talking about the majority.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hope so. We've been asking for these kinds of public unclassified hearings since the first strike in early September, just because if we're going to be getting into armed conflict against a secret list of groups, the American people should hear that. It's not just about what the senators want to hear. And we've had a few classified briefings that were, not impressive from the legal standpoint. But the unclassified hearings are the way that the American people understand what is being prosecuted in their name. And I think that's just a basic thing that we should do if we're going to use lethal force. So I would love it. I'm glad that my chairman and ranking member sent a letter asking for all these things. We have been asking all fall. So, and we're coming up on Christmas. So proof is in the pudding here. We'll see what actually happens.
You said your classified briefings have been unimpressive. One of the defenses the administration has offered from the press podium at the White House is that Congress has been briefed. Secretary Hegseth has been saying this as well. Can you add maybe a little more detail to the substance and the lack of substance, I should say, of those briefings and your dissatisfaction with them?
Well, I mean, I think, for both of us who kind of came up in the GWAT, right, in the global war on terror, it's a very common experience to have military leaders come up to Congress and explain military operations that are going on. Iraq, Afghanistan, anywhere, Somalia. I mean, any places that we have taken strikes, the Pacific, you're going to have a whole bunch of briefings. And some of them are going to be classified. Some are going to be unclassified. I think the thing that is just fundamentally different is right now we are technically in an armed conflict with a secret group, a secret list of groups. The legal authority to prosecute those strikes is a classified document that can't be shared publicly. And then when you ask for details on the strikes, just like, hey, you said you videotaped the whole thing, please provide the video. They won't do that. So, again, we're all prisoners to our experience, but I know what was provided, let's say, for strikes against terrorist groups in Western Iraq, right? I know what was provided for places in Syria that we were prosecuting, and they haven't been able to meet that basic standard. And then they use the concern about classified material as a reason why they won't do a public hearing. And I think, I just think a secret list with a secret legal justification doesn't send the right message for how we do armed conflict. And I've always said, I will just say this is an aside, but I have always said, I'm concerned about this in the strikes of the Caribbean and Venezuela and the military buildup that we now have that's costing us like $1 billion a year to bring all this force into the theater, into the Caribbean and Venezuela.
You said $1 billion a year. I think it's more than that.
So this current deployment, the best numbers we've seen, because of course we don't have great data, is that just to move the force that is currently in there has already cost us $1 billion to bring that in. So not even a year. You're correct.
Yeah,
Sorry. Thanks for the correction. But what concerns me is if they're willing to do a secret list with a secret legal justification for foreign organizations, what does that mean for what they'll do against domestic organizations? And the president, very quietly in September, put out a new executive order on domestic terrorist organizations. And so I know that's not the topic you wanted to get at, but I would just say it's one thing when we're talking about drug cartels in the Caribbean. It's another thing when the president has asked the Department of Justice to put together a list of domestic terrorist organizations and then use the weight of the federal government to go after those organizations. And those organizations don't necessarily have to be violent. They can be anti-Christian. They can have a different view of the family. I mean, it's a public document what he put out, the executive order. It is, to me, what goes on inside the United States is ultimately one of the most fundamental issues of use of force we have in America.
Well, that's definitely relevant to this conversation we're having right now, because the legal regime under which they are attacking these boats is that they are taking out terrorists, a secret list of terrorists. But,
Right.
That's what we're hearing from the spokespersons. And now anyone associated with Antifa, in air quotes, and other groups, as you alluded to, are also potentially designated as terrorists. We're already on the slippery slope. Hey everyone, quick break to tee up a trailer for a new show that I have been dying to tell you about. Chris Goldsmith, audience favorite here, is launching his own podcast. Enjoy.
This is On Offense, and I'm Chris Goldsmith, combat vet, anti-fascist investigator, and founder of Task Force Butler and Veterans Fighting Fascism. I've spent years infiltrating extremist movements, exposing fascist street gangs, and organizing other veterans to stand up for democracy. And now, we're living in a reality where those same far-right maniacs are getting embedded throughout our federal government. That's why I'm bringing my work here. Raw, direct, unfiltered. Every week on Offense, I'll break down what's happening behind the closed doors of hate groups, how extremist groups are getting closer to real political power, and what it's going to take to stop the next wave of political violence. You'll hear from organizers on the front lines and from veterans who know what real service to country looks like. On Offense is for anyone who's ready to fight for democracy. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to watch our videos, make sure you're following Valor Media Network on YouTube. America's in a fight for its future. Let's go on offense.
When you and the other 5 members put out that video reminding those in the military that their oaths lie with the Constitution and not the president, and that there is indeed an obligation to disobey illegal orders, did you have an inkling of what was coming? I mean, either you had an intuition or that is the best timing in politics.
Yeah. So I think all fall, and frankly, even before the fall, we had all been hearing from our various, military friends, family, colleagues, veteran groups, veteran organizations that, hey, we're hearing from folks that they're concerned about deployments of the Guard and what they could be asked to do. We were hearing concerns about what was going on in Southcom and the strikes around the Caribbean and leading up to Venezuela. So we all had outreach from different voices, both in and out of government. And at a certain point, there's so much noise that it prompted us to do this video. And again, I've been talking about this and got into it with Hegseth back in January in his confirmation hearing. I've asked pretty much every Department of Defense nominee that's come in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee, if you are asked to do something that's unlawful by the President of the United States, will you push back and live up to your oath? So we didn't think that this video was going to go viral. It's literally just restating current law, right? But there was a lot of noise in the system, particularly since September, and that prompted us to do it. But none of us had advance notice that within the same week there'd be, stories breaking about, hitting, survivors of an attack, unarmed civilians. Again, we don't have the full information yet because they won't testify about it, but we didn't have specific timing notice on those kinds of stories. No.
I would imagine soon you'll be able to compel testimony. Have you or has anyone from your office spoken with Admiral Halsey yet?
So there's a number of things that are allegedly scheduled for even this week. I want to see if they hold. And I think no one is missing is that right now, the President of the United States is walking back and walking away from these strikes, or like the second strike at least. Secretary Hegseth is trying to say, I just wasn't in the room when that was happening. And they seem to be laying it at the feet of the uniformed military, which is, first of all, completely contrary to, in my mind, what real leadership is, right? The buck stops with you as the Secretary of Defense. And he wouldn't be the first Secretary of Defense to have complicated things happen, but you own it and you take accountability and, you say, we're going to do lessons learned and clean it up. But I think this is proving a big, sort of reason why we even made this video, that at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, these folks are not going to protect you. They're going to protect themselves. So go to your JAG, have that conversation. I was hearing from a number of folks who were like, hey, I was going to my JAG and asking for a memo for the record, just because I'm involved in these strikes, but I've never seen the legal justification. It's classified and they won't show us. So I think, I don't know exactly, again, who did what, and that's why we need a hearing, but to just start laying this at the feet of the uniforms. And at the same time, what I would define as a purge of the U.S. military. I mean, we've had, I think by my count now, 20 folks, GOFOs, senior leaders at the 3-star and 4-star level who have been removed, early retired.
And you're not even talking about the JAGs. That was
no.
That was
right.
The first purge.
You're totally right. Totally right. You're right. It's there's a purge of the GOFOs and then there's the purge of the lawyers and the IGs.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the kind of thing that when I was a CIA analyst, we used to look at foreign governments and you'd watch events going on in these foreign countries and you'd say, what's happening? They're letting go a ton of generals from, the Chinese military. There's a purge going on. I mean, we write memos for the president about purges in other militaries. And so I think when taken together, the story really is that they are trying to bend and remake the military, not into just something more lethal or more capable or more efficient, which I think are things that a lot of people can get behind, but to bend to the will of their agenda, their own personal political agenda, their own cultural agenda. And their own personnel agenda.
It's striking to me that we have known that this was happening for months. I mean, it's in Project 2025. We've had years of warning. What woke up much of the American public to the mindset of this administration and how far they will go is their reaction to your video and the death threats, which even you've confided in me you didn't anticipate. How is that unfolding right now in your life and in those of the 5 colleagues you did the video with?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, this leadership climate is set at the top.
Yeah.
So if the president of the United States is saying that a group of service and veteran lawmakers should be arrested, investigated, convicted, and hung, and repeatedly through memes and retweets, and I mean, I think he's tweeted about it like 30 times, like obsessively. We shouldn't be surprised when that message is carried out, exponentially by folks on the ground. And so immediately, I mean, we were getting hundreds, if not at this point, thousands of threats, graphic threats, voicemails, emails, texts, the whole thing. Social media, of course, is just kind of a cesspool on this stuff. And then, certainly most of us were put on 24/7 security by the Capitol Police. That's still on for me. We had a bomb threat at my farm where I live. We had a suspicious package, and the bomb squad came the next day on that. My parents have been affected. We've had to put law enforcement out there to protect my family. And I think, regardless of whether people agree with us making the video or not, I believe most Americans think it's beyond the pale to threaten someone with death for expressing just basic freedom of speech. And if they can do this, and the president can weaponize the FBI against a senator, well, what do you think they could do against a private citizen? I mean, and I think that the death threats, the violence, the threat of violence, and the weaponization of the government against someone you disagree with, they are, I think, beyond the pale for the average American, whether we're agreeing on a point or not. And again, you and I have both served in dangerous places. This is not the first time that I have felt under physical threat, but it's a whole different thing when your family gets brought into it. It's a whole different thing when your staff gets brought into it. And they didn't sign up for this kind of thing. So I appreciate the question, but, there is one person who's called for violence here. And unfortunately, it was the guy at the very top.
The President of the United States. Last question, non sequitur, but I think your team prepared you for it. When the House flips, and God willing, when the Senate flips, I mean, that's a steeper hill to climb, but would you commit to the kinds of hearings, even a commission, a Warren-style commission to investigate the abuses of power at DHS, particularly by CBP and ICE, when you look at their policies, their human rights violations? How do we send a message that accountability is coming, not only to reinforce the importance of rule of law, but to deter some of the more egregious actions happening right now in our communities? Yeah,
I would offer, I think there has to be more accountability, but, not 3 years down the road or whatever, but literally, I can't believe some of the images that I've seen come out of places like Chicago.
Yeah.
And frankly, when I was pushing to make the video with the other 5, I was focusing more, frankly, and had more concerns about the role of the military in our city streets in the United States than even the Caribbean issue, because you see these videos of people, without insignia, uniforms, covered face, going into places like nursery schools. And then you see the community responding. And you can see how in a quick moment of heated fear in exchange that those officers could feel threatened and start shooting innocent civilians, kind of a Kent State situation. And the idea that American citizens would fear uniformed military, would fear federal law enforcement, not as someone coming to protect them and defend them, but actually as a threat, to me is a strategic and irreversible threat to the United States. That is a real problem if people fear people in uniform and the way that these folks are being thrown into these situations. So the answer is yes, there has to be accountability. There has to be a sort of conversation as Americans about the use of federal force. And I would say we introduced a piece of legislation just to get at this very issue that, hey, you know what? If you believe there's actually a security situation on the ground in a city, then instead of putting in the uniformed military or threatening the Insurrection Act and to bring in like active duty 82nd Airborne kind of types of folks, or bringing the, ICE and border police into these cities, I know police chiefs in my cities would be thrilled to get a surge of resources to hire more cops, right? Let local law enforcement handle security issues rather than folks who are being thrown into a situation that is just a powder keg, unfortunately. It scares the crap out of me.
Well, we have both been in countries where the military is not seen as a protector. Yeah. And God forbid we cross that Rubicon in this country. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.